morning, everyone. We'll call our meeting to order. First item we have is bill introductions. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee introduce the following bills on behalf of the Governor's Office. First, the Governor's Supplemental Bill for all agencies for fiscal years 22 through 25. It is 22 RS 2958.
We have a second. Senator Fagg. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Senator Clays.
Next up, we'll have the Governor's Mega Bill for all agencies for fiscal years 23 through 25. It is 22 RS 2951.
We have a motion. We have a second by Senator Fagg. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This next bill is for the Capers sizable layered payments. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and pay those suckers off here with 22 RS 2916.
We have a motion by Senator Clay, second by Senator Fagg. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Senator Clays.
And finally, we have a bill dealing with a couple of our bonds to be repaid early. That'll be 22 RS 2917.
We have a motion by Senator Clays, a second by Senator Fagg. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, committee. Next item we have is a presentation by the Department of Commerce. Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs from the Department of Commerce. Rachel, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Rachel Willis, and I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Commerce. Thank you so much for your invitation to share the latest regarding the allocation of $1 million of the ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act, to the Department of Commerce. This funding allocation is to support the creation and administration of a grant to support the infrastructure and development to address economic development opportunities statewide with the goal of expanding the state's base of businesses and residents. So since receiving this allocation in December, Commerce has developed a request for application, an RFA, for a program which we titled BASE, Building a Stronger Economy. That was reviewed, that application, that RFA was reviewed and approved by the Office of Recovery. The RFA was actually just released to the public yesterday, so on Monday, and applications are now being accepted throughout the month of February to February 28th. A grant application webinar is going to be hosted tomorrow, and award notifications will be made March 25th of this year. So BASE, Building a Stronger Economy, will provide matching funds, so there is a minimum of a 25% match requirement to address economic development opportunities throughout the state. The BASE program includes infrastructure investments associated with economic development projects, including the development of new business parks, development of infrastructure required to support business expansion, renovation of existing business parks to bring them up to modern standards, development of infrastructure such as railroad sparks, water, wastewater, stormwater, and utilities, driveway aprons, business park signage, parking facilities directly associated with business attraction projects, industrial office and residential space, development of infrastructure related to cybersecurity investments, and of course, other projects related that work to achieve that goal of expanding the state's businesses and residents. So, of course, these grants will support this economic development projects across the state, both rural and urban. Projects submitted must show an opportunity for success. They must complete risk assessment questions within that application. And additionally, applicants are required to document how this project was delayed or negatively impacted, of course, by COVID. So awardees will be awarded 50% of their award funding in 2020, so this year, of course. The remaining 50% will be provided no earlier than January of 2023, provided that that awardee submits 2 consecutive and satisfactory quarterly progress reports. And that those reports then are approved. And then according to the American Rescue Plan Act final rule, all funds must be allocated by December 31st of 2024, and expended then by December 31st of 2026. So I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions? Senator Soltrump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about why you singularly apply that persons need to, or organizations or whomever, need to spell out how they've been affected negatively by COVID. What's that got to do with anything?
Yeah, so my understanding is that that's specifically tied to the ARPA funding. So that's a federal regulation that we're just required to follow from that, from ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act.
So is this a part of the Build Back Better program?
I'm not for sure. I can't speak to the federal. Yeah, thank you.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were there projects that were in mind when this was put together? It looks like the deadline's February 28th to submit an application. An organization would have to have their stuff together to do that in the next.
Yeah, I don't think that there were any necessarily projects in mind. I think the intent was just to get that money out and into our businesses and communities in Kansas, and to help with these economic development projects. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Spag.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Clays kind of took my question. The only thing I would add to that, will you accept applications after February 28th? I want to make sure people understand how important it is to get that app in ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a good question. My assumption would be no, that deadline is a firm deadline, but I would encourage folks that are interested and want to apply to go ahead and attend that webinar and raise that question during that webinar. Or feel free to reach out. There's contact information on the website when you go in to create your application.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rachel, good to have you here.
Thank you.
Trying to get clarity about whether who's eligible, if it's public entities like cities or private. It looks like a lot of the kinds of things you're mentioning in the third paragraph are things that only government entities could do, but some of the other things look like maybe they could be private businesses or collaboration. So
Yes.
how do you see that falling out?
Yep, great question. And on the website within the application, there is a list of eligible entities, and I can run through them real quick for you. So it's county and municipal governments, economic development organizations, recognized tribes within the borders of Kansas, private land developers and commercial property owners, so private developers, 501c3 designated nonprofit organizations, local Main Street programs, and then their affiliates, those Main Street affiliates, local chambers, community foundations, and water rural districts.
That sounds like a really good cross-section, and I certainly think we'll probably have enough applicants, probably beyond the 100 million. And with the 25% match, we'll get $125 million worth of, hopefully, investment. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for being here today, Rachel. On that handout there, on the bottom, it says the final 50% that's being allocated. It's provided that 2 consecutive and satisfactory quarterly reports, progress reports are submitted. What makes a satisfactory report? 50% done, 5% done?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't think I have a specific percentage there for you. I can definitely take that back and find that answer. I don't want to misspeak, so I don't have a definition of satisfactory.
Satisfactory, what qualifies. So.
Yeah, yep. Okay. We can define that for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Rachel, thank you for being here. But this really goes along with a couple of other senators' questions. When it comes to the part about, we were asked, or the question had been asked about, it seems like these projects would already have had to been in place. But I'm wondering, since it says this project was delayed or affected negatively by COVID, that means, to me, that means that it would have already had it been. It couldn't be suddenly, is it suddenly a group like a local government thinks of a project, they'd like to submit application for these funds. They didn't have this project in the pipeline already. Is that possible when it says project was delayed or affected negatively?
Another great question. Yeah, I don't know for sure. I would think that if there was a problem that arose because of something related to COVID, that impacted negatively by COVID, that could potentially qualify under that. But again, with that webinar tomorrow, I would just encourage folks to attend that and ask that specific question or reach out through our website again to the administrators of the grant.
Thank you.
No problem.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many economic development projects have ancillary issues that aren't necessarily the project itself. Who came up with the list of things that are eligible here? And I'm thinking, just to give a frame of reference, I'm thinking when we have some of these projects built out, the issue isn't that it needs an driveway apron or signage or parking facilities, but instead we need places for people to live. When we have 1,200 job openings and the population can't support that many jobs and there's no housing, once you get west of Topeka, that becomes a real issue. Was there any discussion about what issues these communities are actually facing when it comes to economic development opportunities? Because I feel like we can bring in all the jobs we want. We have over 1,000 of them in my community alone, but we have nowhere for these people to live. So who came up with the list? Is the list exhaustive? Is the list complete? Is there no room for input? Was input gathered from anyone outside the office across the street?
Yeah, sure. Good question. The list is not meant to be exclusive, so I don't think that you necessarily have to go down and say, yep, I need a driveway apron, and that was the plan before COVID, and we just couldn't get to it because of manpower, or whatever the case may be. No, that was not the case. So this funding, again, came through the Spark Committee, and so I know that there was lots of time spent gathering feedback from community members as they traveled across the state, hearing what folks needed as it relates to this ARPA funding, and this was one of those ideas that came out of that committee then obviously was approved. So it is more geared towards just specifically economic development, not necessarily housing. But again, this list isn't exclusive.
Senator Clays.
So if a community had a plan to address housing needs that would address a economic development project, would it be eligible, or have you already determined that that's ineligible?
I don't know the answer to that. I would, again, say to join that webinar and to reach out to our specific grant administrators, the folks kind of behind the scenes here. I can also follow up with you specifically on that.
I'd be very interested in that. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rachel, I was wondering, so you get an application for what you're talking about here. There's other funding and applications out there for different projects. Would you encourage people to fill out an application for both of them? Is there somebody that's kind of looking at the master plan that if I didn't qualify for this, I might have qualified for the other one?
I don't know how much kind of master plan in essence of that, right? Like doing specific follow-up, just thinking about the potential quantity of applications that these sorts of things could get. But there's no harm in filling out. Nobody's going to be counted down or tossed out because they applied for this and for that. On this one specifically, you can fill out 3 applications, up to 3 applications.
Other questions? I've got one, Rachel. So, in the past, we've had some of these federal dollars, and the way Commerce handled them was very unfair. They picked winners and losers. They had amount of money, and they took the first, let's just say, I think it was in the $20 million worth of money, and they took the first people to apply. So half of them got paid and got participated. The other half got zero because they weren't the first ones to apply. So how are we going to determine this $100 million? So if we get 100 applicants, do they all get $1 million? Or, if their project's not up to that, then somebody with $1 million may get, $1.5 million because several of them are only 500. How are we going to determine the winners and losers in this program? I mean, if you get 2,000 applications, do all 2,000 get some funding, or are we going to have some that'll be sitting in the cold because they didn't get on the computer yesterday and get their application in?
My understanding is that it's not based on first come, first serve, which I think is the situation that you're describing, or at least how I would understand that. And my understanding is that's not how this particular program will be awarded, that there will be an assessment of the application, the feasibility of that project, the need for that funding, and the match requirement.
So you think there'll be some that won't get funding?
I have no way of knowing that. I don't know how many applicants will apply and what their requests will be and what kind of match they're bringing to that request.
Well, I think the way I read this, they have to bring 25%, right?
Right? They could bring more.
Right, but if they bring 25%, and do you think they would be eliminated then? Because, I mean, they're doing what you're asking.
Well, there's
Or would you take someone else that brought 40%?
right. So my understanding is that there'll be an assessment of the overall application of the project that's being described, the viability of that project, meaning how successful can that project be, and that sort of thing. So that's the best that I can give you.
So somebody's going to choose whether or not your project is, whether you like it as well as you do the next guys, or, I mean,
That's a typical grant process.
I just, I have issues with that when you have federal dollars and you're going to pick winners and losers. I just think that's not a good approach.
Well, if there's not as many, if few people apply, then potentially, right, that pot of funding could cover it all.
Well, that or you give everybody a certain same percent of the deal. I mean, somebody might only apply for 50,000, somebody might apply for 2 million. If you take the total number of folks that apply and give all the same percentage, everyone is a winner. You don't have winners and losers because, well, I didn't quite like this project, but I like this one better. So, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. The chairman's question brought up another question for me. Who is on the committee that approves these projects? Can you give us who that is?
No, I don't know.
Is it more than one person?
Typically with our grant processes, yes.
I know under Star Bonds, it's one person.
That has the final authority, yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
is that the same here? Does the secretary have the final authority over that?
Yes, the secretary will have to sign off on these.
Okay. So do we have guidelines? Is there more guidelines in this? I know you mentioned webinar twice, and I didn't catch where to catch that webinar.
Yeah.
But are there guidelines available that would give them a little more information about how to apply and what to apply for?
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'll reference that webinar again, and I'm happy to send the link out to the committee so everyone has it and can share it with their community. Absolutely.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Rachel. Yes, if you would share that with all the committee members, we'd appreciate it. That'll give us a little more insight into how the program's going to be handled.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy to. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll have an overview of the budget analysis documents. Amy Deckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Morning, Amy.
We are excited. We've done some major changes to our budget analysis document. Some of you have already seen that in your subcommittee hearings yesterday. I'm going to ask Stephen to come up and walk you through all the new sections. We are looking for feedback after you have an opportunity to look at these throughout the budget season. So please let me know if you have any comments, but I'd ask Stephen to come up and walk you through the document.
Thank you. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, committee. For the record, Stephen Wu, Legislative Research. I'll go through this fairly quickly since I believe a number of you have sat on budget hearings already. The budget analysis is broken down into 3 big chunks. You'll be able to view the budget request at a high level, a medium level, and a more granular level. So on the example you have of the Kansas State Historical Society, the first 3 pages, 1 to 3, contain an executive summary of the overall request. This is a very high-level view of what the agency is requesting and what the governor is recommending for this agency. There's the addition of some colored graphs to help you visualize it a bit more. Page 4 and 5 contains a summary of expenditures and funding. You can see how the agency is spending its money and the overall history of how much, for example, state general funds it receives. There would also be information here on specific fee funds if it is determined to be relevant to the agency's request or the governor's recommendation. So this first section comprises the overall high level view to give you the broadest summary of the agency. Pages 6 to 8 will give you some more detail by fiscal year. If you turn to page 6, you'll see an analysis of their fiscal year 2022 budget request. This is a bit of a departure from how our document was structured previously. Now, this table up top, you'll see it's broken down by what the budget looked like throughout the process. So at the very top, you'll see what the legislature approved, and as you go through the process, the agency submits a budget request after the legislative session. You'll see those changes reflected in that middle section there, detailed agency revised estimate. And at the bottom, you'll see of that table, you'll see the governor's recommendation. So for this agency, for 22, you'll see, for example, that the governor recommended no changes. So you'll be able to see a dollar by dollar, essentially an itemization of the changes. So the next couple of pages detail similar information. There's a change from actual expenditures as well as the 23 analysis. Page 9, you'll see a big gray box on the top that is titled enhancement request. This is a new introduction to our document this year. It will be a space to discuss specific special topics for the agency or, for example, a supplemental enhancement request that the analyst determines needs a bit more space to be explained or detailed. Detail that you can't normally get in that itemized list before. So up until this point, if the beginning part was the high-level view, this middle section comprises of the sort of mid-level view. It gives you a bit more detail on what the agency is requesting and what the governor is recommending. From that point on to the end of the document, with a small exception, is the detail on the program levels. So if you flip through on pages 10, 11, 12, and onward, you'll see a breakdown of expenditures by program. You'll also get some detail on performance measures as we have incorporated some more detail on performance-based budgeting in this document. And it'll go through each program and detail the specific, the statutory basis behind these programs, as well as the goals of it, as well as an analysis on what the agency plans on spending for this program. And the agencies that have capital improvements will have it at the very back. So for this one, if you just flip it to the very back page, 20, you'll see a breakdown of capital improvements. This is similar to the capital improvements section in our document last year. There's just an addition of the actual year 2021 spends as well. So if you take the document in totality from beginning to end, this gives you the most granular detail of the agency's budget. So you can take it in chunks, first couple of pages if you just want the quickest view, the middle of the document if you want a bit more detail, or the entire thing if you want the most amount of detail for this budget. So would be happy to answer any questions at this point, but I imagine that you folks will dive into these pretty deeply as you move throughout the budget hearing process.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Stephen. I think this is a big improvement and appreciate the staff's work on this. I have one of my naive questions. When we approve budgets then this year, even though it talks about overview of 21 through 23, are we not really actually just looking at 22 and 23, or do we need to make motions to approve all 3 years?
No, it's just 22 and 23. The 21 is detailed there for just a reference to the actual specs.
Just for comparison. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kirshen.
Today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a little different question on the Historical Society. Why didn't they do their photo art display in the visitor center like they do every year? This year they didn't have enough entries, or what was the decision on, you know?
I have no idea, but I can follow up with you after.
It was always down there with photo contests, you know, that legislators can help fund and stuff. So everybody got to see that for 3 or 4 days. It was always down there.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Good reason. I just was curious why they didn't promote it this year.
Yeah, we'll check into it and follow up.
That isn't a high priority, but.
Question.
Senator McGinn.
Because I think they had help from legislators, like Senator Denning's wife did that a lot. So just in case you want to volunteer and give them a call, maybe. Anyway, I was just going to say it's about time. Thank you. Been asking for that for a long time.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Stephen. Oh, sorry, Senator Hawk.
This is another silly question. I'm good at silly questions, but page 15, and maybe I need better glasses, but there's the actual agency and governor. I don't see a green on the bar. Just curious why that is.
In instances where the governor's recommendation is similar, is the exact same as the agency request, those lines will essentially overlap.
Oh.
So the governor's recommendation will show on top. That's something we're looking to remedy for moving forward. But in instances where the governor just concurs with the agency's request, those lines will overlap. And so the only color that will show would be the one on top, which is the governor's recommendation.
So the green's under there.
Yes.
So goldenrod trumps green.
No comment.
That could be a Green Bay comment, but anyway, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Committee, I guess we'll just have to pay attention to whether or not the snow's canceled tomorrow or not. And so we're adjourned. And if you're on a subcommittee tomorrow, I guess we'll just have to see whether or not we're working. So thank you.